servants there who help us and take care of your children. There are blue cards or communication cards somewhere around you. If you've not completed one of those, or if you have some piece of information that's an update, that would be good too. Next week, we have the opportunity to have some of our missions friends from South America who are ministering in Ecuador be with us for Friday evening for Ecuadorian picnic. And then Sunday, we're going to have an open Q&A session here in the sanctuary for those who are interested in coming at 9, and then service will start at 10:30, as it typically does. And so Patrick and Jennifer Pinho and their family will be here with us, and so will Mandy Hallett. And so if you know Patrick and Jennifer and Mandy, you want to come and be part of both Friday evening and then Sunday morning as well. Food truck update. Any updates you want to toss in about the food truck, Susan?
We can always use helpers. Got lots, but some days on the schedule less than others, but it's been awesome. God blessed us with the breeze on the hot days and lots of young people and lots of kids, and it's been going awesome.
Yeah, we have seen an influx of kids from across in Cobblestone. We have probably a total, we've met or talked with probably 15 kids and probably 6 or 8 families in various ways in the Cobblestone neighborhood, which is something that through the years, Pastor McGarvey prayed for, Pastor Sean prayed for, Pastor Wood prayed for, Pastor Ross prayed for. We've been praying for Cobblestone for a long time, asking that God would give us a person of peace there, that would be a place that we could maybe start a study, start a ministry center. I don't know. Coming up here in a couple of weeks, not this coming Saturday, but Saturday the 14th, Ciudad de Dios will be having another yard sale, and it happens to be on, I think, the 24th. So the 14th is a yard sale. There's some stuff in the deacon's closet, so if you've got things at home that you want to bring so that your home has less things, please bring them and be setting them here in the foyer, and we'll find a home for them, and Ciudad de Dios will help sell them in a yard sale, and that will help support the Ciudad de Dios Church. On the 21st, you're invited to be participant in a family fun day that Ciudad de Dios is doing for the wider Latino Hispanic community. And I'm still working on getting information about some specific tasks and time frames. And so I've been asking so that maybe we can say, okay, well, we need us to do X for this long, which would certainly give us a chance to plan a little bit better. So that's on the 21st. So if you just kind of star something in your calendar, there's going to be outdoor games, inflatables, they'll have hot dogs and drinks and a few other things, and be aware of that. If you have your Bibles, this will be the last week that we're in the Luke text. And next week, I think that we'll be starting in some of our promises through the summer, and we'll see where the Lord takes us from there. You know, I'm a bit embarrassed to tell you that I've started an exercise program, or intended to start an exercise program now for more than a year. And perhaps some of you share my tendency to enjoy the couch just a bit more than I should, and ice cream. I have a particular affinity for ice cream. I should say that it likes me more than I like it, but it's quite the opposite. I like it more than it likes me, and what makes change so difficult? Now, sometimes when change is forced upon us, it's more difficult. But even if we want something that we say is good, we want better grades, we want a different job, we want to be in a different house, we want to move, we want to clean up stuff that's around our property. Making change happen is really difficult. What are some of the reasons that you feel that change is so difficult? Just shout out some answers. Your mind. What does your mind do? It anchors you. That's a really good phrase. It anchors you to what you're used to. What makes change so difficult for you? Fear. Fear. What is it we're afraid of? Oh, you can't do that to me. We'll go over here to Beck.
It's messy.
Change is often messy. Change is introducing this component of the unknown that's a fear product. And we're anchored to the thing that's most comfortable, not necessarily that is best, but is most comfortable because we're familiar. And it's messy going forward. You might be surprised to hear, now you might not be, but you might be surprised to hear that when Jesus called his disciples, he called them to a life of change. I know that sounds terrible. Alas, it's happening anyway. I mean, because you're really not staying the same. I mean, you're really not. I mean, it matters not what you do. Change is happening to you. It's happening to our bodies. It's happening to our workplaces. It's happening to our country. It's happening to our environments. I mean, it's not that change isn't happening. When Jesus talked to his disciples, he didn't suggest they changed because change wasn't going to happen. He suggested change because the system, the way, the relationship with his Father was of such incredible value that to stay in the other system just didn't make sense. I mean, when Jesus walked around and he walked up to the lame man and he said, "Would you like to be well?" Did it make sense for the lame man to say, "Why, yes, I feel quite comfortable in this illness. I'd really like to stay here"? No. And when he walked up to the lame man and said, "Would you like to be well?" the lame man said, "Well, of course." And Jesus said, "Well, I have a way. It's me. And if you follow me, I can take your lameness, I will make you well," because Jesus was revealing himself as the King of the kingdom, the representative on earth, the one sent on behalf. Jesus was all about change. I think one of the reasons he was about change is because the system that the disciples lived in, just like our system, steals our joy, steals our peace, and takes our security. I read in a book recently about coaching where the gentleman said that we worship our work, we work at our play, and we play with our worship. I thought that was very thought-provoking. We worship our work, we work at our play, and we often play at our worship. Instead of living in the moment of each and enjoying what God has brought to us. Jesus was all about change. He put out truth, and he invited people to change. Now, if you look in Luke chapter 14, you read about his challenge. Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 25, and he said, large crowds were traveling with Jesus. You remember we've been talking since the beginning of the year about Jesus and church, family, kingdom family, and personal family, and how Jesus challenged us to live in our kingdom family and to bring our personal family so that the kingdom family would fill in all of the gaps in our personal family. But if we live for our personal family, the gaps that are left over are always going to be too big for us to figure out. But if we come and bring and live in the kingdom family, God seems to make a way as we each use our gifts in the body. And that's how we're built. We're built to be part of the body. And each of us have a role. So Jesus turned to his large crowds, Luke 14, start 25. Traveling with Jesus, turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and his children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And if anyone does not carry his cross and follow me, cannot be my disciple. And he says a few other things there about if he wants to build a tower, he's going to count the cost. Talking about we need to count the cost. If a king is going to go out to war, he's going to decide whether he can win. If he can't win, he's going to fly the flag of surrender so their country doesn't get decimated. And then in 34, he ends this section by saying, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile, and it is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. In this text, he's lobbying that his disciples will recognize change as part of the process as a disciple. Because God is taking us from being lame, being sin sick, being trapped, and moving us to a place of health and life where the kingdom future, heaven, informs how we live on earth. Where the gifts of God are of greater value than earthly presence and presence. Change is just all about it. Jesus was teaching his Father's values. And as we looked into chapter 15 and 16, Jesus is having this conversation about change, and he's expanding the Pharisees and the tax collectors and his disciples' understanding of Jesus' Father's values. And into this diverse group, Jesus shared some stories. So we'll look at 4 values that Jesus is trying to illustrate. First is that God values the pursuit of people that others would consider lost. God values the pursuit of people that others would consider not worth chasing. The stories that Jesus described were intended to challenge the Pharisees and the teachers of the law in chapter 15, verse 2, who complained that Jesus welcomed sinners and ate with them. Well, God values the pursuit of people that others would consider lost. God's values are different. He's motivated by having people recognize his greatness and his glory. God loves where humanity would reject. God pursues those who are outside of his family without ever having hope of returning. Sometimes he goes and finds them and gets them, the lost sheep, the lost coin. Sometimes he stirs in them, chapter 15, verse 17, sometimes he stirs in them this awareness of, why do we want to be here? Why do we want to be in this life that's struggling all the time? And he brings them, verse 17, chapter 15, he brings them to their senses where they say, I'm going to turn and I'm going to go a different direction. Because God is chasing lost ones like us. Lost ones like the sinners and tax collectors, lost ones like the Pharisees. Because God values the pursuit of people that others would consider lost. And when he finds them, he throws a party because the lost was found. When he finds them, he doesn't just, do what we would do and like miserly give them the token little tidbit. He gives them this abundant, grace-filled, excessive thing. You saw in chapter 15 when the son came home, verse 22, the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Bring a ring, put it on his finger and his sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast. He restored him to a place in the family that was meant to be his all along. As we're out on the food truck, we're chasing lost people that everyone else would maybe consider not worth chasing. As I've set up this small produce stand, and I have some more produce in the back today if you'd like to get some, take it home. Yesterday we saw 3 people. We were out in the rain. It was a little crazy. It wasn't raining too hard when we were there. Thankfully, the truck came with an awning that most of the rain had stopped, but it only trickled down your elbows when you rolled it back up. But we are out there, and we're looking for the lost ones, the people that maybe God would want us to love a little bit. Just like the shepherd loved the sheep, and just like the woman loved the coin, and just like the father loved the son. Yesterday, top conversation was with a gentleman who drove in the church to turn around because they were on this delivery mission. And as they were coming by, I could see in the car that it was he and a lady and a kid in the back. And And I slowed him down, and I'm sure they wondered what I was doing. And I said, well, we have some vegetables on the truck. Did you want some? He's like, vegetables? Like what? I said, we have jalapenos, tomatoes, and peppers, and onions. And I said, you like those, right? He says, yeah, we like all that stuff. I said, well, would you like some? We're just putting it away. I'd love to get you some. He says, well, how much? I said, $1 a pound. He says, well, that sounds terrific. He looked to his girlfriend, his wife, and said, do you have money? She says, well, I've got $3. I said, well, let's see what we can find. Do you want to come help me pick it out? So we got in the food truck and we rifled through it. And he said, I said, well, what brings you to Carolina? And he says, well, we just moved here. I was incarcerated, and I've gotten out, and we're trying to start a new life. I said, oh, I know it's hard. It's hard to make transitions. If you've ever talked or ever heard someone talk about the transition coming out of a prison environment into regular life, quote unquote, the structures, the rules, the situations there are a place of stability and security. You get out in the regular world, you have very few people who will take chances on you. Lots of people judge you just as soon as you were noticed to be someone who came out of the penal system. But I said, if you ever wanted to come and be part of a group of people that would let you be you and grow with you, this church is a neat place to do that. And he said, really? I said, yes. We believe in second chances. We believe that God is a God of grace. We believe that this is a place that you could come and you can bring some of your stuff, because we bring our stuff every week. And you could sit in the chair and you could bring your family, and we would love to have you. He says, what time your service start? I said, 10:30 tomorrow. He says, well, we might come. I said, well, if you do, that'd be fantastic, but no pressure. Like, I'm not trying to convince you to come. Our job is to serve. God's job is to bring the people. Let's not confuse that. Okay? Sometimes people in church confuse that, where it's our job to drag people to church. No, it's our job to be Jesus where we live and work and talk and serve. God's job is to tug them in. Our job is to serve, just like Jesus. He went, served, invited. God values the pursuit of people that others would consider lost. Secondly, God values using money to make friends more than investing money for a secure retirement. Now, this one here is kind of a challenge for us American folk. We believe in the value of retirement because when we get to retirement, we think we should stop working. I don't notice that that's the case if you read the scriptures. Because it seems to me like when you're lame and you're healed, you walk the rest of your life, right? And when you walk, you think, oh man, that Jesus healed me, right? When you get to turn 65, you don't say, well, I'm going to stop talking about that because I'm in retirement. Okay? No. When he rescues you, it's like the story in the video. I mean, it changed her life. Whatever God did in her changed. It didn't like change her. It like changed her. Like it was a big thing. It renovated the things in her heart that she loved once. And then she loved something else. It was like John said. It was that it had been reduced to the best things. Well, God values using money to make friends more than investing money in our secure future. Luke 16 brought us to this crazy parable about how, verse 9, we are to use, look at Luke 16, verse 9. Jesus says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. In the Greek, it says that they will welcome you into their eternal dwellings. So it's definitely more of a they will welcome than you'll just make it. Why would you make friends with people if you were going to be the one that made it and they weren't? You would make friends in hopes that they would get there. Maybe not first, but you know, that we would get there together and they'd welcome you. Just like if you came to my house, I would welcome you in. And I would probably give you some tomatoes and some lettuce and I'd probably invite you to have some tea or some coffee or something. I like coffee. That's a whole different thing. But verse 9, he says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves. He doesn't say use worldly wealth to build a nest egg the size that will support your life forever so you don't ever need to depend on me again, which is the modern measure of a good retirement, where you collect enough money so you are secure. In the scriptures, it seems to say that God provides. Provides for the birds, provides for the poor people, he provides for the rich people. God provides. And one day, it's all going away. So why live as if it's the only thing that makes us happy? God is motivated by love. And in this context, he is teaching his disciples not to set their minds on money like the Pharisees did. And so if we're sitting here and our minds churn on money Monday through Saturday, and we come to church and we think we shouldn't talk about money because we're at church, because money is one of the least talked about topics in church. God here is saying use your money for something eternal. And he's inviting his disciples to move to a new level of faith where they trust God with their future. They trust in God's provision, and they waste money making new friends. How does our belief in God transform how I spend my money? I'm not saying bring more money to tithe. I'm saying that if God has changed us, we should use our finances to let people see that God has changed us. You know, one of the best ways to impress somebody is go beyond financially. Go beyond and support them financially when they don't want it, when they are unsure about it. Because people in the world don't do that with money. People in the world are miserly with money. Sometimes I'm miserly with money. It's part of the system. But trust in God's ability to supply. Throw a party. And it will transform your life. I can tell you already, it took me 9 months, okay? 9 months. We bought the food truck 9 months ago, and when we bought it, I had this sense that I ought to go start a produce thing in the front of the church on days we didn't use it. It took me 9 months to pull it off, okay? So if it takes you 9 months to figure it out, don't worry about it. But that thing in the back of your head, your heart, where God is calling you to do this thing, to make friends, to use your money, to gain influence, do that. What you don't want to do is do the next thing. Because God values an honest response to truth more than one that justifies our entrenched positions. Okay, that was a mouthful. Okay. So basically, God values honesty more than self-justification. God values honesty more than justification. We see that in Luke 16, verse 14. The Pharisees who loved money heard all of this and were sneering at Jesus, and he said to them, "You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of men. But God knows your hearts. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight." God values an honest response to truth, not one that justifies our perspective. I have to confess, I'm an entrencher. I justify myself a lot. I think that my positions are right a lot. And I don't always verbalize it, because if I verbalized it as much as I think it, you would think that I'm an arrogant turkey. But I have this thing that inside that thinks I'm right a lot. And I find myself justifying what I think a lot. Sometimes it's a huge fault. And when I got to this text, I had to ask myself, in what ways do I have habits and priorities that I justify that God would say, I'm not so impressed? One of the things that I have wrestled with and struggled to justify is I have enjoyed growing plants. And so I took some money and I built some growing tables in one of my hallways. And when I told Marcia about it, she rolled her eyes like I'd never seen them roll before. Particularly because the room was full. And she said, where are you going to put that thing? And I said, I don't know, we're going to find a space, it's perfect. But there are 4 layers, and I can put the plants down, and I bought lights so I can put the lights down next to the plants so they won't get all leggy. And so I bought all this stuff, and when I got it all finished, I had this sense in my spirit that I should cut it all up and burn it as an offering. Now, I frequently have these tensions in my life, where I have $50 in my wallet and I see somebody that has a financial need, and there's this piece of me that says, God says, give them that money. And we had an extra bed in my house and we were in Pittsburgh, and I came home and I said, Marcia, hey, I have this sense that maybe we ought to give that bed away. And she's like, what do you mean give that bed away? We just bought it. We bought it it was perfect. You're not supposed to buy beds at yard sales. This was perfect. It was still in the plastic. It was I don't know. And I was like, yeah, I had this sense maybe we should give the bed away. And she says, who are you supposed to give it to? I said, well, I don't know yet. She says, So I have these things that I think. And sometimes I have trouble sorting it out. Because they're things that people think are crazy. And other things that people think are crazy, I try. We should go to the farmer's market and buy produce and put it up in the food truck on Saturdays. Some of you think that's nuts. And it's okay. I'm a little crazy in my head. But I justify this. I justify things that I do. Some of it I justify because I don't know if it's me just being a little finicky about stuff, or it's God saying, hey, this is a thing. And so I had a conversation with Alan, and I said, I got this thing, and I feel this impression that I ought to do this thing, and I don't know if I should or if I shouldn't. And I eventually got to the place where I said, okay, Lord, I'm not going to justify it, and if you will affirm from the scriptures or in somebody that will come and speak something to me that will be the thing that says this is what, it's something that clicks based on more than just my situational feeling. I'm interested in it being yours. So I just need some help knowing if it's me or if it's you, and if you will please clarify this for me, I am open to it going away. And he's not brought it to me yet. But it was hard to get to the point that I no longer justified what I wanted. And see, Jesus to the Pharisees are saying, you guys justify how you use money. And I wish I could say that just that one thing is the only time I ever justify, but I justify all kinds of things. And I have a feeling that I'm with friends here that justify all kinds of things. I justify how I feel when I do something noble and I pat myself on the back for being so good. I justify judging my neighbor or coworker for the time they waste, but I think it's okay when I waste it. I justify how valuable Bible studies are as I learn and learn and learn, but I don't practice. I don't live different because I'm smarter. But it's okay, I'm in the Bible study and that's helpful. I justify dumb stuff I should just release. And sometimes I think I'm more pharisaical than the Pharisees. And I ask myself, as God looks at how entrenched I am and how I justify myself, What parable would he use to encourage me to change? Or you? As he looks at what you justify in your life, what parable would he offer you? Because he wants you to change your beliefs and behaviors. In this context, he gave the Pharisees the parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost boy. He gave his disciples the parable of the manager who knew he was losing his job, his life, and he was told to use the money in a way that's eternal, not physical, because he would be welcomed into eternal dwellings someday. And then he told the story about the rich man and Lazarus, because the Pharisees were so locked on money and the pride of control and pieces that they couldn't see the lowly people that Jesus cared about. What parables would God use to change your behaviors? And lastly, God values the pursuit of humility that reflects Jesus' attitudes toward friends who need Jesus. The whole story of the rich man and Lazarus is a story about contrasting Jesus' perspective toward lost people and the Pharisees' perspective. The evidence that the Pharisees got it wrong was that the rich man never noticed the Lazaruses. And I wonder what evidence our money in our life shows of what we care most about. God values the pursuit of humility that reflects Jesus' attitudes toward others. You know, I felt kind of bad these last few weeks. I'm not sure if you heard me say it, but nobody has come up and challenged me about it, and it might be okay. But here's what I've said. I've said, I don't think we will change this. Like I've said, this is what it seems like Jesus is teaching. And then I've specifically said, but I don't think we will change this. I think we're entrenched. And nobody ever came to me and said, hey, you just told us that we're not going to change that. And I would have said, you're right, I did say that. And I felt kind of bad about that. I said that I don't think we're willing to do what seems wasteful with our money. Like I don't think that we will go use our money to make friends who will one day welcome them into eternal dwellings. Like I've said that. And I felt kind of bad about it because it sounds terrible to say it. To say, we're going to continue doing what we do because we don't really want to change. But I don't know what to do with it. Because he says so clearly we should take our money and use it in these ways that seem just nuts. But it's not inconsistent with everything he told his disciples. The idea that the ship is going crazy and that you shouldn't be worried because Jesus is in the boat. Like, that is totally nuts. Or like Jesus when he says, I'm going to send you out 2 by 2 and don't take anything. Don't take anything except a change of sandal, just to take your shoes and your coat. Don't take anything with you. Just go and people will care for you and you'll minister in my name and you'll see miracles. Like the disciples would have thought, that's nuts. Why would we ever do that? Like we should take a suitcase and money. Jesus says, no. We are the church. We're God's people saved by grace and promised heaven as a reward that is 100 times better than any reward on earth. And yet I find myself locked on to the things money will buy and what money will do. And I don't know how to unlock it. It made me wonder if all that Jesus provides and all the grace that God offers and all the mercy that's pushed my way are great truths, but poor realities. They're great truths, but in reality, we just live and suffer and struggle just like always. The truth is that God is managing all of that stuff. The truth is that God is in charge of our life, just like when my kids were little, when Ben was little. When Ben was 10 years old, he could dress himself, he could pick out his own clothes, he could get in the fridge, he could take care of stuff. When Ben was 10, he could steer the car. He would, we'd put him on my lap, and he'd steer the car, and he couldn't touch the pedals, but he could steer all right. Ben was 10, he could click on the TV. He had a little money in his pocket. He could go into the store. He kind of knew what stuff was. He could add and count and do all that stuff. But he always, knew that Mom and Dad were always there. When he was 12, it was the same way. It just changes a little bit. When he turned 14 to 15, it was kind of, he had more responsibility, but he always kind of knew that Mom and Dad were around. Then we get older, when we get to be 48, 49, you call your dad and you ask a question. You call your mom and you ask a question. You still connect there. And fundamentally, you know that you're in control of your space. But if you need help, you can call somebody, right? Now, how is that not like what God is talking about when Jesus says, "Let me carry the load and you do your part"? How is that different than when Jesus says, "Disciples, change because there's a thing that's better for you, and let me be responsible for you"? When God says, "Let me take care of you. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will have enough cares of its own. If I can take care of the birds, I can take care of you." Why do you fritter and fret about all this stuff? Why not use money to make friends that will welcome you someday into your eternal home? Why not use money to meet your neighbors, to help bring them joy in some way? When I lose sight of my heart's temperature, God frequently brings challenges because He wants me to evaluate what's going on in my life. It's been said that when you see smoke, there's fire, because the smoke is the evidence of something going on. When God brings change in our life, it's because God sees things that are going on, and He wants us to trust Him. He invites us in those moments to recognize that He is in control of the world, and that Jesus came because God had a plan, and that as God executes that plan in our life, He loves us. And He wants us to trust Him even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. We talked about it last week. It's crazy to think that Jesus left His place of wealth and security to come to ours. It's crazy that He continues to offer Himself to us. This week I got caught up with the boys trapped in the cave in Thailand. Maybe you've seen it, read about it. Tragic story. The first casualty was an ex-Navy SEAL from the United States. He believed that going into that situation and trading all the money that he had accumulated in the world was worth the risk. Now, I don't know about his eternal destiny. I don't know any of those pieces. But he emulated, he illustrated, he showed the right perspective of someone who's a disciple. Because in the very same way, Jesus rescued me. Jesus rescues you. Jesus wants us to be rescuers for others. And that's the whole message of Luke 14, 15, and 16. Jesus came to save sinners, one of which we are, so that He could one day take us to a place in heaven that is very real. And He's left us here because He wants us to do the same for others. We shouldn't fret and worry about the future. We should use the money God's given us to prepare, be good stewards, but to invest in the lives of people that we want desperately to come to heaven with us. Wisely embrace the little you have while you have it. Seek lost people and care for the ignored, rich or poor. Embrace the little you have as a gift so that you can affect the eternal dwellings of others around you. Your impact will deepen and your life will be rich. Don't you want a rich life? Or do you just want riches which go away someday? Let's pray. Father, I am humbled by how money captivates me. We need your help to live out this truth. These ideas are crazy in our system. But you have given us this picture where you have a system that's entirely different, and that you've invited us as disciples to come into it and to trust you with it. Trust you in ways that are insane in this world because they're made for another world. Lord, I pray that you will seal in our hearts a desire to leverage our money for eternal benefits, and cause us to be sad when we see ourselves locked on to the dollar instead of locked on to the souls of men. In Jesus' name, amen. As we close, if there's a thing that you want to pray for, if there's a confession you want to make, the altar is open. If you want someone to pray with you, come here. If you'd like to be prayed for, to be anointed with oil, move to the back. There's some chairs in the corner.